tragedy had struck a prominent fixture in Midlothian, Virginia, a small hamlet just west of the capital of the old Confederacy. Abigail Tinsley, an octogenarian known to many for her generosity and dry wit, had been found dead in her house. Someone had strangled her. Tinsley lived alone. Her husband, a spendthrift, died soon after making partner in one of the most lucrative law firms in the area. After his death, his wise investments resulted in her receiving a significant financial windfall. She contributed to many social causes, including local hospitals, museums, and charitable organizations. She never mentioned having any children, siblings, nieces, or nephews. For all intentional purposes, her neighbors considered her to be alone in the world. Her only companion was a small dog named Toto, who she pampered as if it was a Homo sapien. Nothing was too good for the pooch. When the dog turned its nose up at kibbles and bits, as well as other popular dog foods, she spent lavishly on a special diet recommended by her vet. When the dog scratched behind its ears excessively, the owner used special ointment and concoctions recommended by the animal healer. Though many thought that she was being taken advantage of by the provider, she often replied, "Nothing is too good for my baby." The dog shared something in common with its owner. It was just as snippy and finicky as she was. The crime occurred in Belgrade Plantation, an affluent neighborhood known for its lush green lawns, large majestic magnolia trees, flamboyant crepe myrtles, and a lake in the center of the enclave full of fish prized by many anglers. A work crew hired by the Homeowners Association kept the neighborhood in immaculate condition. As they moved from house to house, the landscapers created sculpted, well-manicured lawns, not a leaf, stem, or branch out of place, and weeds had to find another place to invade. Sometimes, to achieve its beauty, the sputtering sounds of lawnmowers and leaf blowers created a deafening roar that permeated the air. However, the residents of the area considered this a worthy compromise for the community to maintain its title as one of the region's most prestigious localities to live. The area was very inviting and idyllic, not only to the inhabitants of the neighborhood, but also to outsiders. It was not a gated community. For that reason, many people, including proud upstanding citizens, money-grubbing scoundrels, or persons of low morals, ventured through the vicinity to enjoy its beauty, possibly exploit its residents, or even commit a dastardly murder. Tinsley was found by her housekeeper, Madison. On the day of the tragedy, Madison reported to work as usual and knocked on the side door, but there was no answer. Abigail was a stickler about time. Because of her strict upbringing, she detested people late for appointments, especially those she had under her employment. She even extended this discourtesy to the landscaping crew that maintained the estate's bushes, trees, and lawns. Usually, she would be at the door just as Madison would arrive in the driveway, but this morning, the homeowner was not present. Madison knocked and knocked and knocked, but no one came to the door except for the barking dog. It seemed frantic as it yipped and yapped to anyone willing to listen. Madison then walked around to the front door and rang the doorbell. But again, there was no response except for the dog. But as she peered through a window, she saw what appeared to be the body of the homemaker lying motionless on the floor. There also was evidence that the room had been ransacked. Objects were strewn haphazardly across the floor. Tess Pedigrew, a teenager who lived in the neighborhood, knew Tinsley. The news of her demise saddened her, just as it did the other residents of the community. I just saw her yesterday, she thought. Tess first met her as a child while selling Girl Scout cookies in the neighborhood. Initially, she was reluctant to approach the old woman's house. From conversations that Tess had had with her peers, they thought she was a bitter, vindictive woman with a crabby attitude. Because of her husband's departure, she felt that the world owed her something, and she would take it out on anyone who approached her. Some even described her as being downright creepy. Tess was intimidated by her. On their first encounter, which took place at her doorstep, the homeowner's large, imposing figure and brusque mannerisms made her uncomfortable. Tess felt she was gruff and short-tempered, but decided to fight fire with fire by matching her word for word in a spirited conversation. Tinsley finally warmed up to her. "You've got spunk. You sort of remind me of myself when I was your age," she said with a deep southern drawl. She signed the receipt handed to her by Tess after ordering 10 boxes of cookies. Tess immediately noticed her handwriting. It was full of elaborate letterings, slanted loops, and squiggly lines. It was very expressive, a real work of art, just like the person who wrote it. Tess felt lucky. From what she had been told by others in her troop, whenever people tried to approach her about buying something, including Girl Scout cookies, the old fogey usually shooed everyone away from her house. But after making the business transaction, Tess knew she wasn't as tough as she appeared to be. But Tinsley did make a special request of her. "When referring to each other, we will use last names only, no first names." Tess thought that it was an odd request, but she complied. Over time, Tess grew to like Tinsley. To her, the widow reminded her of Miss Havisham, a character in a novel by Charles Dickens. However, unlike the character in the book, Tinsley was once married. Tess observed that she often wore clothes that seemed out of date, wore her hair in styles from the 40s and 50s, and wore excessive facial makeup. Her eyebrows seemed to be stamped with a broad brush. Her eyelashes were excessively long as they curved up toward her head. Her lips were thick and full of overly bright lipstick color, and the pinkish red caked-on rouge on her face made her look like a puffy-cheeked doll that could be purchased at any local toy store. Over the years, as Tess got to know her better, she knew that beneath Tinsley's cold exterior beat a heart full of gold. Tess often saw the homeowner at the door as she walked daily to and fro past Abigail's house to catch the school bus. They often exchanged waves and smiles, no matter the time of day. Even Toto got into the act as she wagged her tail after seeing the young girl. Also, at special events sponsored by the Belgrade Homeowners Association, Abigail, who rarely attended, would greet her and give her words of wisdom and inspiration. They also exchanged birthday and Christmas cards. They seemed to have a budding grandmother-granddaughter relationship. After hearing about Tinsley's death, Tess then thought about yesterday's activities. It was her 16th birthday, and she had a lot to celebrate. She played the day's events in her head. She remembered exiting the school bus and hurrying to get home to see what presents she had received. As usual, the landscaping crew was in the area sprucing up the place. While strolling through the neighborhood on her special day, Tinsley opened the screen door and flagged her down. She wished her a happy birthday and told Tess that she had a gift for her. She invited me into her house. Though all of our previous interactions had taken place outside, this was the first time that she invited me into her house. Even Toto wagged her tail at me as if greeting a long-lost friend. "You didn't have to do this," I told her as I stepped inside and accepted the gift. I remember the offering. It was a thin, rectangular-shaped box covered with brown paper bag material. A string was wrapped around the contents to hold it together. The exterior resembled a package that you might carry from a butcher shop containing steaks and other cuts of meat. I just want you to know that you are very special to me, and I cherish our friendship, Tinsley said. I could have gotten you the latest electronic craze, but I think this will better serve both of us. Okay, I replied. Though I was listening to Tinsley, I was distracted by the gift, wondering what was inside. As I examined the outside of the package, I got a chance to see some of the house's interior. And I thought, like Tinsley, the house was full of out-of-date furnishings. It contained a living room with velvet-winged armchairs, and the walls were studded with wood paneling. There were no pictures of family members. The dining room had a large teakwood table with corresponding chairs, which had thick seated cushions in contrasting colors. Tess noted that the kitchen was full of avocado-colored appliances, which seemed to have reached their prime. But in a small corridor just beyond the kitchen, I noticed a pair of mud-covered shoes. There also was some mud on the floor next to the shoes, which seemed to indicate that the mud had been tracked in from the outside. I thought it was odd, so I adjusted my head to get a better look. I knew that Tinsley never traveled outside past her stoops, except for the yearly community outing, which she rarely attended. And as far as I know, Tinsley didn't have any visitors. It was only she and me in the house. Then she said, as she opened the screen door and motioned me to leave, "You can open the present when you get home." I got the impression that she was trying to rush me out of the house. I paused momentarily, then reluctantly stepped out onto the porch with the package in my hand. Then out of the blue, as she stuck her head out the screen door, with a funny look on her face, she said, "If anything happens to me, promise that you will find a good home for Toto." Hearing her say that made me feel kind of nervous. Did it have a cryptic meaning? I thought. I don't know. Nothing seemed to make sense to me as I watched the door behind me slowly close. I was sort of suspicious of something going on, especially with those muddy shoes and her rushing me out of her house. The more that I think about it, I should have done something, but I always thought that she was sort of odd, but in a good way. Besides, it was my birthday and I was in a hurry to get home. I didn't give it any more thought until now. I should have paid more attention. Had it been any other day of the year, I might have acted differently. You know, a lot of people trespass through this neighborhood. Maybe the muddy shoes belonged to the killer. Tess sighed for a moment as she recalled Tinsley's last words and actions. That was the last time Tess saw Tinsley alive.